Testing. Here we go. Dr. Joan Rosenberg, welcome to the Story Engine podcast.
Well, thank you so much. I'm actually really excited to be here.
Dr. Joan, I am so excited too. We were just talking a few minutes before we started recording, and there are so many things that I want to just jump the gun and dig right into right away. But I want to introduce you properly to the audience, and that is with this question. Will you tell me about a story in your life that has defined who you are and how you show up in the world today?
Absolutely, and it's also quite linked with the work that I do in the world. I started out in the world as a very exquisitely shy and exquisitely sensitive child who didn't feel like I didn't feel like I fit in. Felt I would look over and see all my peers hanging together and go, it's like, how come I don't have what they have? And when I would walk over to them, I realized that gaining confidence didn't happen through osmosis. So just standing there wasn't going to make a difference for me to fit in and have those kinds of experiences. And I was also bullied through a great number of years, certainly all through my childhood and adolescence, and also into college a bit. And so those experiences really defined me. And on the one hand, it kind of opened questions that have kind of defined my life. One had to do with how does one develop confidence, and the other part of it is that I adopted a high value of being kind based on being bullied. I never wanted to treat somebody the way I'd been treated, and so one of my highest values is to be positive, kind, and well-intentioned.
Well, and hopefully it seems like it certainly paid off in the long run. I really feel for that story. I can remember for some reason, maybe, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Enneagram test.
Of course, yes.
Are you a 4?
You know what? It's so long since I took it. Somehow I think I'm in that neighborhood, but I don't really remember where I land.
Okay, we'll spare the audience a whole dive into it's a personality test. Yeah. But I'm a 4, and I grew up with a very similar, at least like internal story. I don't know if it's actually true or how things, but I always was like, I don't fit in anywhere. I don't, I had a hard time finding my place. But I think that that's also a common trait. And I'd love to hear this from the audience in the comments or in the emails if you respond. But like, I feel like a lot of people who go on to make big impacts and do great things kind of start out feeling kind of weird and awkward and not really certain of how they fit in the world.
I would agree with you. Absolutely.
So you mentioned you highly value kindness, and how does that work in your work right now? How are you impacting people's lives, making them better, and just kind of what does your day-to-day world changing look like right now?
I would say probably in at least 4 or 5 different arenas. I teach graduate school, and I teach clinicians, budding young clinicians, master's and doctoral students, how to do psychotherapy. So teaching them an approach in terms of how to be present and well connected with the people they're serving, and how to serve well is one way that shows up. The second is my own personal kind of coaching and psychotherapy practice. The third is I have a couple TED Talks out there, so that's serving the world. I also speak and train in the area of kind of broadly speaking emotional mastery and confidence building and resilience. And then my writing. I just came out with a book. called 90 Seconds to a Life You Love. So there's many different avenues.
We've got a long ways to go. Well,
Yes.
here's where I'd love to start. And working with, you mentioned training master's students and other clinicians. And there's a lot of people on this show who are professionals. They have high value services, or they are coaches
Yep.
in some way or another. And I would love to hear from a psychologist perspective, like, when conducting psychotherapy, what are some things that any coach could learn from you to bring into what they're doing, whether they're doing weight loss coaching to financial advising to marketing, whatever the case is? Are there some trends and some really valuable things that you try to instill in all of your students?
Yes, there are. There are a whole approach that isn't out. I mean, it's out to the people I teach, but not out to the world more broadly. So it's a great question. And there were a couple things. I think of therapy as choreography. So in that regard, then I would also think of coaching as choreography, and it's a movement towards the really important open-ended questions.
Yeah.
To being able to listen intently to and track what's going on so that you can summarize well. And probably one of the most unsung skills, but one of the most critical skills, is to be able to reflect feelings back to the individual. So it's the coach's ability to move towards pain that becomes super critical in helping someone actually move the person they're helping. That is critical in helping them move through the pain. And the last one would be the coach's ability to actually confront and address what they're seeing.
So going deeper into a lot of what you've mentioned and you've specialized in terms of maybe this is where the term disguised grief can come in, because I imagine if you're a coach, and no matter how you're coaching people, you can run into these emotional blocks. Again, if you're coaching somebody in marketing and you're like, hey, you need to do a webinar, and they've got like some fear of, being seen, you can run into this. So this isn't just somebody who, is coming and expects to sit on kind of the Sigmund Freud style couch or something, right? This is no matter where you want to work, no matter who you are, if you are engaging with people, these are useful things. So can you tell me a little bit about how you help people work with their own emotions? Because I feel like you need to have emotional mastery before you can succeed in helping others navigate and guide their emotions. Or is that not true?
No, I wouldn't. Well, it would be great if that's true, but I don't know that all of us have spent that amount of time really kind of digging into the emotional side of our house, mm-hmm. and especially digging into the unpleasant feeling side of our house. So I would say there's kind of two answers to the question. One is the more immediate one, which is how does one actually experience and move through unpleasant feelings, or how does one deal with their own unpleasant feelings? And the second part, it has to do with the unpleasant feelings that are attached to painful and difficult life experiences, or painful and difficult life episodes, if you will, or right, so life stories. Mm-hmm. So for me, there's two very important layers to that. And the first part has to do with one's ability to move into or lean into those unpleasant feelings. So I can go both directions. Yeah, I'll follow your lead on this.
Yeah, I'd love to hear just kind of about leaning into these things and discovering these things, because I think, again, not just these are valuable things, not just with your own coaching, but in a sense, like coaching yourself and making good decisions on how to move your business forward and taking the right risks. I think being able to understand your emotions and being able to tune into those is crucial to being able to, I think, successfully navigate a lot of these things.
We're very much in agreement. So again, let me add a couple different layers to this, because and then I'll see if, depending on how deep you want to go, I'll see if we can't track all the different layers. So the first layer obviously would be dealing with the unpleasant feelings, and I'll speak to that in a moment. A second layer would be dealing with kind of the thinking style that we have and what we're saying to ourselves, which tacks onto this idea of harsh self-criticism, which is a crucial piece for me to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
The third is anxiety, which I really recast in a very different way than most people talk about it. Anxiety and fear. And then the fourth layer would be this notion of how does all this tie back to those painful old life experiences. So let me start in with the first one.
Yeah.
So I started to talk initially about what I went through as a kid, and the first question that those wounds opened up to was how does somebody develop confidence? And as I got into my professional life and started working with people, what I realized is as much as our thinking gets in the way, what I found is difficulty tolerating unpleasant feelings got in the way even more. So a second question then kind of percolated for me, and that is what made it so difficult for people to tolerate unpleasant feelings or experience and move through them. And what I realized over time, and this is now decades of time, is that the answer to the second question about unpleasant feelings actually answered the first question about confidence. So for me, confidence, and this would then relate to taking those risks, like doing the webinar or whatever, a talk or whatever it might be, to advance your professional life and to advance your career, has to do with the confidence is the deep sense that you can handle the emotional outcome. And that those two words are the key pieces. The deep sense that you can handle the emotional outcome of whatever you face or whatever you pursue.
Wow. I don't think I've ever quite heard confidence defined like that. I don't know if I've spent enough time asking the question, what do you define confidence as? But that was not quite what you might expect to hear or from an answer.
Right. But that's my answer to it.
No,
but watch how this unfolds.
Yeah.
So then the question is, well, how do you develop confidence? And the foundational piece of confidence for me is be able to experience and move through 8 unpleasant feelings. And that really then is the thrust of the book that I came out with, the 90 Seconds to a Life You Love. And so, but I talk about being able to experience and handle those unpleasant feelings, or in essence, to deal with the emotional outcome by dealing with eight unpleasant feelings. And it comes out through kind of a formula. So think of it, a colleague of mine affectionately called it the Rosenberg reset, which stuck. So if we think about the reset, the formula is 1 choice, 8 feelings, 90 seconds. So the 1 choice is I'm asking people to be as aware of and in touch with as much of their moment-to-moment experience as possible, as opposed to avoidance, which comes through, it's so elegantly nuanced, but it could be drugs, it could be shopping, it could be pornography, it could be food, it could be sex, it could be having feelings about having feelings, it could be harsh self-criticism. There's countless different ways for us to distract and avoid. So the first thing is the first thing that I want people to do is to choose in and lean into unpleasant feelings and be aware of them as opposed to avoid. So that's the 1 choice, awareness. The second part of it is 8 feelings. And again, through all my decades of experience, what I found is that if people can experience and move through the feelings of sadness, shame, helplessness, anger, vulnerability, embarrassment, disappointment, and frustration, then they can pretty much pursue whatever they want. So, and it's like, why these 8? So these are the 8 feelings. Talk about 1 choice, 8 feelings. These 8 feelings, because they're the most common, everyday, spontaneous reactions to things not turning out the way that we perceive we need, or the way we want.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So they're everyday reactions to stuff not going well.
I can see that. Yeah.
So that's what I want people to be able to handle.
Incredible. And so what we've covered a couple of different areas of this so far. You've shown us how we can start to work with that in ourselves. And I know that there's, a whole ocean of information that you have. beyond that, you're showing us how to work with that in others, or how to train that into other people. But one of the things that you mentioned before we started recording, and I think it's tied in with this, is you mentioned you work with Bo Eason, and you actually can do this with an audience of people. So, or maybe not necessarily exactly this, and correct me when in a moment, but you can get up on stage and you can work with an audience's psychology from the stage and get a visible change in energy in the room. And I would love to hear a little bit more about kind of what that looks like for you, and how you would work with the psychology of an audience to maybe get them more open to your message or whoever's message, and get them in the right emotional state.
You know, and I want to frame that a little differently. It's not what I will do in that setting is I actually kind of frame the experience that the audience is likely to have, so that I want to give them the heads up, because I know that Bo is going to take them down the road of exploring some painful life experiences. Mm-hmm. So what I want to do is to actually frame what they can expect from a psychological standpoint, so that they're not surprised by it, and that there's a mild anticipation. They're not going to quite know where it goes, but that that helps them know that, one, that they're going to be headed down a little bit of a self-exploration journey that could open up some memories that might open up other memories. And the second part of that is to reassure them that somebody's on hand if something feels like it gets too hard, or they don't know how to make sense of it. And so then I'm available to individuals, or the audience as a whole, depending on the questions that get asked, or the need that's there. But it's not a situation where I'm trying to have the audience necessarily react a certain way. It's really to frame the experience for them, and then to be available for them.
Well, and for those who don't know, Bo Eason is a very, very powerful speaker, and he does challenge people on a very deep level. And you know, when you get challenged on a deep level, when you want to make deep changes, when you really want to improve your life, it's almost inevitable that you've got to go find something ugly in the back closet. So it's just part of the journey. But I think that's so valuable, what you did and how you help people with that. So you mentioned you've done some TED Talks, and I think as I would love to hear a little bit about. I mean, I've got a ton of questions around this, like from everywhere from how did you secure these speaking events, and how did you prepare, and what have you done since then, or how have they worked for your business since then? But tell me a little bit about, like, how did you first get invited to do a TED Talk? Did you research it yourself? How did you apply? What did the starting up process look like when you had your idea you wanted to share?
Both. I ended up being invited to both. So part of it, I think, is the first, but I would say it started earlier. And the first was thinking that I had an idea that might make a difference in the world, and that it was, as Ted wants things that are unique, and that it was a little bit different. And so the part of the ideas I'm expressing today are part of what's in that the first talk. And so envisioning was kind of the starting point. And it probably took, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, but I ended up in a situation where the individual that was producing the Santa Barbara TED Talk, our paths crossed. And she wanted to talk to me about the work I was doing in the area of emotion, and I wanted to talk to her about the TED Talk. And I went. She wanted me to go first, and so I told her the idea, which she said, "Well, that sounds like a unique idea, and it would be worthy of TED." And then I asked her how I could help her, and it turns out everything I related to her was the very thing that she used moments after I told her. So I think that had an impact, and I'll spare the details, but it had an impact, and I ended up being invited to do that TED Talk. And so the preparation was, again, it's outlining the idea. It's hours and hours of honing the message. It's hours and hours of practice, and then it's the delivery. The great news is I'm less than 10,000 away from 1,000,000 views at this point. So
wow.
yeah,
Well,
so
congratulations.
yeah,
So key tip number one, you've heard it here first, become the psychotherapist to a TED curator. That is how you get
well, it
a TED
wasn't
Talk.
quite the psychotherapist. It was really it was one conversation, but the conversation itself was impactful.
If they're okay, so as far as like you mentioned, tons and tons of practice, and this is something when I work with my clients, I like help them put together a presentation, and they feel all good after the coaching call, and then as soon as they start practicing, at first they're like, "Oh my god, it's all falling apart." But I'm like, "You've got to practice." Can you tell me about some of the practice and preparation, and maybe was there one good insight that changed, like, "Oh, I should say this instead of that," or "I should move this way when sharing this idea," that you really feel took your presentation to the next level?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things with that. One is when practicing, not again. Part of the writing is part of it, and having good people to assist with that. Because I ended up turning to many different people to get some guidance on it, and each time I did it, it got better.
Mm-hmm.
But beyond that part of it, it's practicing it out loud. It's chunking it down and it's practicing it out loud. And then if there were like even up to the day or two before, when I was practicing the whole talk with a friend of mine, there were certain lines that I just kept on missing. And it's like, you know what? Those aren't as relevant. If I'm missing them, and they're not sticking for me, then let me just pull them out. Or situations where I would think I wanted to say something one way, but again, I kept on messing up that line, and it's like, no, then let's clean that up. So but it's the practice out loud
Mm-hmm.
that really makes the difference in being able to figure out what works in that regard and what doesn't. I think the other thing I found was, as I've put together different talks, because I speak more than obviously just doing the TED Talks, and so I speak and train. What I find is that where I start to feel a little bored, then I've got too much content going and not enough emotion. So what I'm doing is I'm also registering how, and that I notice it more when I speak it out loud than when it's written.
Oh yeah.
And so you've got to do the writing, and then you've got to practice it out loud. And those boredom points were things that I was like, yep, we're going to finesse this one too.
I love it, and this is probably a result of all of the kind of the deep work you've been doing. But I love that you gave yourself permission to remove a line that wasn't working instead of just trying to hammer it out. And I feel like a lot of people, especially when faced with a big presentation, they don't give themselves that grace or flexibility that they could. And I think that's really, really powerful. And then being able to critique yourself, I think especially in I feel like the smarter you are, the easier it is to make the mistake that you described avoiding, where just putting too much content in, trying to teach too much stuff. I think again, when you're faced with either, speaking at an event where other health experts are, or being on a big stage where a lot of people are going to see it, people feel the need to be as smart as possible. They've got to like prove themselves, where really it's not so necessary. And if you just pare it down to what can make an impact on me right now,
right.
It's kind of taking the focus off of how do I make myself look smart versus how do I make a meaningful impact in these 20 minutes I have.
That's been a big learning curve for me too. Is over time, it's realizing it has nothing to do with what you think others think of you. It has everything to do with the message you want to deliver. So it's actually staying centered on the inside to deliver the message.
Well said. And probably another thing that working in kind of these unpleasant emotions and uncovering your disguised grief can help with. So you're 10,000 away from 1,000,000 views. Tell me how this TED Talk has changed your business or changed how you're working with people. And does it bring in clients? Were you intentional in thinking like, oh well, I hope this talk really eventually helps this program or something? Tell me what the post TED looks like.
It's a great question. Well, let me do the pre-TED for a moment first, because
Yeah.
this is important. I started writing the book, the 90 Seconds book, without that title. It was under a different title 10 years ago. So in 2009 is when I first, 2009 to 2011, I wrote, 250,000 words. No, that's not right. 250 pages.
Okay.
And then I attempted to sell the book. So pre-TED was involved in multiple attempts to get an agent for the book and to sell the book and that sort of thing. And along the way, I realized that I wanted to do a TED Talk. So probably 4 years-ish into that, I was like, I think this may be a good idea for that. So it was 2015, I believe, that I connected up with the Santa Barbara producer of the TEDx, and then it eventually led to the TEDx talk that I did in August of 2016.
Very cool.
And again, mind you, part of what I envisioned, because I talked about envisioning the TED Talk as well, part of what I envisioned is that good things would come out of it.
Mm-hmm.
A good thing that would come out of it for me, one of those things might be, or in this case was, a book. It turns out that roughly a month to 6 weeks after the TED Talk was released, I posted it to a wall on Facebook, a group page on Facebook. Somebody took that and posted it on her own Facebook wall. And her book agent, scrolling on the subway, saw it.
Yes.
Just scrolling through her phone, stopped, saw the talk, reached out to the colleague of mine and said, "Can you put us in touch?" And she reached out, said, "Had I considered coalescing these ideas into a book? Had I ever considered that?" To which, of course, my response was, "How would 250 pages?"
Yeah. What was the before title?
Emotional Pilates.
Nice.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
That's good, but I like the new one better. I think but yeah, it's always funny to me in my own books, the title that I start with, often dramatically changes from what eventually gets published.
Yeah. So, well, yeah. So one of the best things that came out 5 days after that agent saw it, I had an agent.
Wow.
And then, of course, what came out after having the agent was getting the book out in the world. What's happened with getting the book out in the world is people are their lives are changing,
Mm-hmm.
and on its own, it's organically grown to 1 million views. So I'm grateful that I took the risk. So again, to get back to the whole notion of how important it is for us to take risks to put our work out there.
Now, in your own business and how it's structured, is it set up in a way that you want to sell like just more copies of your book, or do you have kind of courses or certifications? Do people who read your book get in touch with you and then are these trying to go for positions like being psychology students wanting to apprentice under you, or is there coaching?
Not so much that directly. In fact, it's probably not yet enough out into the world of psychotherapy yet. So that's next on my list. It's a matter of what I can do at one time. Yes, there will be an online course. I'll be doing a retreat in 2020, and in all likelihood, there will be a certification as well, kind of a train the trainer. I'm getting requests on both those fronts. So I'll be doing a live event, and then from that I'll end up building out some certification to help people be able to use this approach with people that they're coaching.
Awesome work.
Yeah. So, and the thing is, really, it's not about me. This was never about me building out my practice. If there's anything that I think is more important for me to be doing, it's actually to get out to broader audiences, speaking and training. So that would be, so if for anybody's listening,
Mhm.
truly, that's really the thing that I would welcome even more, because it's no longer about kind of a one-to-one approach.
Yeah.
Yeah, am I grateful when the book sells? Of course, I am, and I now have the benefit of understanding the impact it's having, which
Yeah.
which is significant. And but the more important thing is for me to be able to have more and more people be aware of it. So it's the speaking and training that I.
Yeah. Well, what I love about this, and a lot of people come to me with similar talents and abilities, but they haven't quite honed them. But they always want, this. They're always thinking, how can I get this to grow my business so that I can do this or that. But I think the people that when you get to the point where you have a vision that's just so compelling and so fascinating to you that you just make it a part of what you're doing, and you just want to bring it and share it with the world. And again, it's totally like beyond you or your own things. You've like committed to this message, just like almost exactly what you were saying, when it's not about what people think of you as a person, but it's you've again committed to this higher vision, higher message. And I love that, because that not only helps the message succeed, but I think it creates an energy and a power and an inspiration that gets you out of bed every day too. And so there's it's leading with a true generosity, and I think it's what the world needs a lot more of.
Thank you. Very kind.
So we've got just a little bit more time, and we've covered a lot of things, different from emotional mastery to speaking in front of millions of people. And I'm sure, since there's 90 seconds in your book, I was wondering if you could give us some kind of short closing thought that we could use that might help us better master our emotions.
Well, yes, that would be kind of coming full circle on the 90 seconds piece,
Mm-hmm.
and that is that the one kind of nuance that or the important element of what emerged from understanding kind of unpleasant feelings, or understanding how to manage them well, was realizing through the neuroscience research and their findings, that the way most of us experience feeling is through bodily sensation. And what dawned on me is that it wasn't a situation where people had a hard time, just didn't want to deal with unpleasant feeling. What I realized is that they didn't want to deal with the bodily sensation that helped them know what they were feeling. So think embarrassment, like the heat coming up at into your chest and face, or the sadness, or disappointment being kind of a downward
Mm-hmm.
pressure against the center of the chest, or whatever it might be for you, or anger showing up in different ways, a clenched jaw, or heat at the back of your neck. It doesn't matter what it is. It's unique to you. And again, the thing that dawned on me is that that's what made it so difficult for people to tolerate unpleasant feelings. So the key here then is that what I want people to do is to lean into that. So it's again, stay aware of and in touch with what you're experiencing, breathe if you need to, and understand that it's just 8 unpleasant feelings you need to deal with. That's the foundation of confidence and risk taking. And the third part of it is to understand that the way you're going to handle the unpleasant feelings when they arise, no matter what you're facing, is by kind of breathing into it, staying present to it, and riding one or more short-lived bodily sensation waves. And that's the 90-second piece that Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor was the first to kind of make the observation that once those biochemicals rush into our bloodstream that activate the bodily sensations, they flush out of the bloodstream in kind of an upper range of 90 seconds. So we're talking about being able to experience and move through short-lived bodily sensations to stay present to our feeling experience.
This is awesome. And this is probably more complex than this, but me thinking this, is there I would love to see kind of a pie chart or an infographic where, and maybe this isn't 100% accurate, but like you were describing, the feeling, like if you feel embarrassed, you're like, you feel warmth or you feel, these kind of things. Well, that means you're probably, experiencing this emotion. And so just a way to kind of be like, oh, I feel weird, but I'm not sure what's going on.
Well, there's two things to that. One is there was a study that was done, I think, across about 20,000 people, and there is an infographic, a color infographic that's out that shows, and I would say kind of it's a gross picture, a rough picture of where people would describe where they experience certain feelings. But I really want to, I would say that's great, and it's nice that it exists. But the thing that I also want to emphasize here is that how we experience feeling is very unique to us.
Mm-hmm.
So you might, other than making some generalizations that when feelings are more expansive, they tend to be more pleasant feelings. When experiences feel more constrictive or heavier and that kind of thing, then they're more or colder, then they tend to be more unpleasant feelings.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that would be the kind of the broadest generalization I would make. But how you experience embarrassment is likely very different from how I experience it. And
I see.
So it's that there's really a uniqueness to it.
Yeah.
Like one client will tell me that she feels heat in her forearms, and that's how she knows she's angry. But another client will tell me she feels heat at the back of her neck, and that's how she knows she's angry. So it's that unique to us that that I don't think that chart will be quite as relevant.
Darn.
Yes.
Well, that's okay. Of course, it's part of the journey, yes. and yeah, part of the discovery process. Right. Well, Dr. Joan, it's been so much fun chatting with you. I feel like we've covered a lot of different information, and it's all very relevant and very applicable no matter where you're coming from or what you're doing. So you've done an amazing amount of work and are making a huge impact. And I want to thank you for sharing your message and story with us on the Story Engine podcast.
You bet. Thanks so much.